Very good.
Thanks.
Hands up who now thinks they know a little bit more about blockchain. Like the Excel, that's very good. I write for Forbes, BBC, Newsweek, and I've written a lot about blockchain of late. So my example about what blockchain was, or what trust was the UK horse racing industry. If you can think, there were 3 Arabian horses that came here in the 18th century, and now we have a blockchain of horses where people will pay millions of dollars for horses that have never run, based on the trust of the progeny. I don't think that's as good as yours, you know what I mean? Fortunately, there are other people here that are smarter than me, so if I can introduce my panel, we're going to have a chat about stuff. Please join us, wherever you are. So Jenny, we might as well start with you first. Tell us who you are, what you are.
All right, well, I'm the banker. So my name's Jenny Knott, and I have been in investment banking, global investment banking, for over 30 years. I grew up in banking, so I've done every, I like to say, shitty job inside the bank. And then latterly I was the CEO of a global investment bank, which was operating cross-border in various emerging markets. During my time inside banking, I learnt what really doesn't work and what our problems are. And it's not the stuff the boards want to talk about, because it's all about business processes, data architecture, and operating models. So not the sexy stuff we like to talk about at the top of the shop. We want to talk about client growth and sectors and all those interesting things, and how the regulators are a pain in the butt. What we don't really address is the fundamental problems that we have inside banks, which is about fragmentation. I was a CTO for some time and a COO, so as I say, I do know the workers of a bank. So I went, after banking, into market infrastructure to try and help the industry understand that no bank is going to solve its cost-based problems all by itself. It needs the cooperation that we heard earlier from Troy and Mustafa. So I worked in an organisation trying to solve the market infrastructure, and now I've set up an advisory firm where we help the FinTechs try and stop being another fragmentation, but actually resonate with those organisations, financial services, to solve at a much greater, more strategic level the problems, and make sure they resonate with the decision makers inside those organisations, and also working with the decision makers inside banks and private equity firms and hedge funds to understand what fintech they should be concerned about and investing in, and which ones they should actually adopt, or what is a better strategic solution. So
awesome.
It's
awesome. Thank you very much. That's all right.
It's a bit long, but
it's longer than a minute, but it was fine. It was very interesting. Gilbert.
Thank you. Gilbert Verdian. So I have a cybersecurity background in banking, in government, coming from regulators as well. And my job has always been to keep things safe. And my introduction to blockchain was when I was at Treasury during the financial crisis. I was the CTO there. And as a security person, it was extremely interesting. And I thought there's a lot we can do with this technology. I got government introduced to it back in 2008. And the comment from the policy guys in Treasury was, this will never have any impact to the UK. And that was right at the time. Yeah. So I left it at that. But then since I've founded the ISO standard for blockchain, I wanted to regulate the technology in a better way. I wanted to take it out of the dark web and have mass adoption. I did that in 2015. And now there's 53 countries working together to standardize blockchain as a technology, which is much needed, and since then we've built the technology that gives basically solving the enterprise challenge around interoperability.
This is Quant
network. Yeah. So we developed the standard, worked on the standard, developed the technology, and we've solved the major barriers for enterprise because we give people choice for the first time. They can use any blockchain and build upon our platform.
10 years. That's like a veteran. I suppose.
It is, and I did not buy any Bitcoin back then because as a security person, I just didn't trust giving out my details to all these unknown people.
Well, you're talking to someone whose wallet was hacked in October, and the little nest egg went away just because my private key was stolen. Yeah, but we won't talk about that. Richard, tell us about you.
Good morning, Richard Crook. I'm the CTO of CHORUM. We're a distributed platform builder.
helping clients get out there and fulfill their blockchain strategies. Prior to CHORUM, spent 10 years over at UBS building their ledgers before they became fashionable, and then moved over to RBS to do the same after the crash. Ran their emerging tech lab for 4 years and got the R3 company started and their 100 million Series A, which took us to building Corda. And then recently, last year, you'll have seen my team building out Cordite, which brings cryptocurrencies or enterprise tokens into the enterprise ledgers and merges back the world that we have spent quite a lot of time separating between cryptocurrencies and distributed ledgers, and for good reason. You'll also seen us in the FCA sandbox building a digital mutual, which is a mutual society built on a blockchain, and that's a real live operating one that we can talk about. If we're declaring Bitcoin, I was in it and lost it in 2013 with the Mt. Gox hack, and then had a cracking run in 2017. I have now a story to tell my grandchildren that I came out with 10x, so I'm quite pleased with that.
Well, I used to be in the mobile games business, and we were offered Angry Birds for 250k, 51% share, and we turned it down. So we're all winners on this panel, right? Because I should never say that story. One thing, Richard, that we spoke about earlier, I think, I didn't speak to you about it, Jenny, but PwC released a survey yesterday of 600 so-called blockchain savvy executives. I don't know what that means, but it seems they knew more than most. But of those 600, 48% said that regulation was the biggest impediment to blockchain's evolution and scale. Do you think that's a fair enough figure? It seems quite high to me.
So I think it's good to see that we've got 600 blockchain savvy executives. I think that's important to recognise that the executive level is recognising the need for a blockchain strategy and the need to come up to speed. It's also really important to recognise that half of them have worked out that the tech is the least of your worries. Whenever you are doing one of these types of projects, you recognise that everyone wants to focus on the tech, and we've heard a bit about scaling and performance, when actually no one in this room, very few people in this room, would know what or how GPS works, but everyone knows it's on their phone, and they all know that it tells them pretty closely where they are on the surface of the planet, but actually most people don't know how it works. And the same is true of TCP/IP, which you heard we only got into the Windows in '98, and 20 years later, most people in this room don't know how TCP or IP works, but they know how to buy a book from Amazon, and that's all they care. I think that's really the important part there, which is they're lifting away from the tech and focusing now on the bigger challenges. Governance, legal, regulatory are always going to be harder to move. They are slower moving than your engineers.
Do you think that they call it reg tech, I think is the word. I've seen an ecosystem of companies being built around it. It seems to have gone away a bit, regulation, over the last year. It's all gone a bit quiet. Are you seeing any areas where regulation is making an effect and put those executives' minds to rest?
Jenny?
Yeah, I think we're talking about different concepts there. So
Yeah.
let me just roll back a little bit. First of all, let's be very clear. Regulators do not regulate technology. That's not true. They regulate how you use technology potentially. So the concern that regulators have is nothing to do with blockchain in of itself. It's some of the points that Troy made about data being shared in cloud, and regulators are very nervous about data, and they're very nervous about cloud, and they're very nervous about crypto, and therefore they're creating a lot of noise around protecting investors from ICOs, protecting investors from all the hacking. And so what they're trying to do is regulate the use cases and some of the standards, hence what you're doing is absolutely critical. When we talk about reg tech, what we're talking about there is FinTech solutions for meeting regulatory challenges. For example, KYC, so all the FinTech providers out there. So the only reason they're quiet is because they're all trying at the moment to put in place what they should have done 5 years ago around MiFIR and everything else, and getting ready for the next wave of regulation, which is coming down the line, which is about senior management.
Tell us more about that, the next wave.
So the regulators split their regulation into two concepts. One concept is the FCA, is about conduct, and the other is Prudential, so the PRA, who talk about capital adequacy and liquidity, robustness, and all those good things. So when we talk about MiFID II, that's all about conduct. It's about ethics and standards and behaviours and treating customers fairly and all that good stuff. When we talk about the prudential stuff and coming down the pipeline about capital adequacy requirements, liquidity requirements, RegTech splits itself between those two things, and there's quite a lot happening. So the one that's most imminent is the next round of attestations for senior leaders in organisations. So they have to, I call it Sarbox in the 21st century. So Sarbanes-Oxley's, back of Enron, lots of noise about what actually goes on in your organisation. And now board members and senior managers have got to attest to the systems and controls in their organisation. So enterprise level robustness, honestly, because I get quoted, I always get told of heaven and hope and hell chance. So
Yeah, please do, yeah.
of being able to do that robustly. But can technology support them in those initiatives? Absolutely. And FinTech and RegTech,
Yeah.
critical solutions in that space.
Do you think what I've found out over the last year is that I used to get bombarded with press releases with next things happening, whether it's going to be crowdfunding or, and it usually irritates me very much. But with blockchain itself, it is extraordinary how quickly this is evolving, right? You know, and it's
Well, it's
really
10 years old,
not boring.
No, it's not. But the problem is that you know, the board level of many organisations, the real decision makers, those that have got to embrace strategy. I was saying earlier, you get these two extremes at the board level. On the one hand, you get some twit who's read something in a Sunday paper and comes in, or she comes in to the board meeting and says, "What's our blockchain strategy?" And they know nothing about it. They don't understand. Everyone goes off in panic. The other extreme is they've read something and they're very cynical, and they know that there is no silver bullet for their organisation to solve their inherent challenges and cost challenges and business model challenges. So the problem is you've got these two extremes in debating it. So the really powerful for financial services and many other industries that you've heard from Troy and others already, and obviously Richard and co are bringing to life is this is about solving a problem that's repeated. It's about the coordination and cooperation in sectors to bring trust to a whole life cycle, be it in traceability or in it just a transaction, and making sure that we all use the same version of the same record for the whole life cycle of that transaction or the sourcing of something.
Yeah.
So those use cases are phenomenal, but it requires behaviour that is different at the top of the shop.
Yeah.
And most of the boards that I interact with are not yet capable of
Are they
thinking,
even a little bit capable?
It's DNA of many human beings, I'm afraid, and we've even seen it in the blockchain sector where digital assets and Blythe didn't quite understand that this technology doesn't belong to an individual. This is not technology that you should be controlling and putting in a box and not sharing. In fact, the most successful use cases are when somebody, an organisation, as we heard earlier, De Beers, have created something and then share it. Maersk have created something, share it, encourage others to adopt. That is very bold behaviour, and it's one of those identifiers. So I really believe in cognitive diversity rather than just gender diversity. And when you talk about cognitive diversity, it's those boards that are thinking truly differently, that they're able to develop something and share it for the greater good of their industry. Those are going to be the survivors and innovators.
So we've seen that, and I think that's a really good point to bring out, which is there's only so much fun you can have on your own with a blockchain. We've heard that already. Where you are seeing success is when industries are coming together around a challenge in their industry. They have a distributed or decentralized challenge. One of the best examples in banking is payments, where actually the banks have to come together, and they did in the early 70s. They call it SWIFT, and that is a really good example of a distributed network from 30, 40 years ago. When that came through, the only solution we had was to centralize it in a database and gift it to a third-party actor, a monopolistic market utility. And that play that you're seeing from DAH, and you've seen Blythe Mathers now drop away as the CEO, step down, to create yet another proprietary platform is not the way you're going to see this evolve. Something like email is a really good example in the mid-90s, where Microsoft were given their right arm to have owned that technology and made sure that all your emails run through their servers. And actually, we had very successfully stopped that happening. And if you look at the progress we're making in some of the open source enterprise blockchains, in the hyperledgers and the corders, you're now seeing DAH as a proprietary platform drop away, and the enterprise platforms that are starting to make ground are those that are not proprietary, that are open source, and they are getting around industries and bringing them together. But they don't start with the technology. You just look at something like Ripple, which starts with a coin, starts with the technology, and then attempts to try and bring the banks in. That's not how it works.
No, absolutely.
You look at something like Marco Polo, where the banks were brought together they brought them together and then looked to work out what technology to use. That is the successful blockchain strategies, and we've seen again that's on slow.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to the you told me earlier that your job was keeping the country's money safe in the Treasury, right? So you have a pretty...
Nothing happened on my watch.
No, absolutely. Forensic, well, debatable. The fact about blockchain, it seems to me that there's this panacea. I don't think I know as much as you three about it on a deep level. On a cultural level, I mean, De Beers are not the only one. I mean, Ford Motor Company, I think last week, set up a blockchain with IBM to source cobalt. Cobalt's in your phone, in your laptop, and increasingly is going to be in batteries for driverless cars. That type of thing, for me, as a kind of cultural observer, if human rights abuses are being stopped by blockchain, that is just amazing. And all the stuff that Troy was saying earlier, where blockchain seems to have crossed over from being a crypto thing, right? I think that's happened, even the board level members that you spoke to. But I would say about blockchain, it must have weaknesses.
Yep.
A bad blockchain is a bad blockchain, right?
Yes and no. So just a point with what Richard was saying, we're making the same mistakes as an industry and as a society as we did 30 years ago when the internet evolved to what it is today.
Yeah.
With the internet was really, there's two different versions. There was the OSI version and the TCP version. The OSI version was closed, proprietary, hard to implement, you had to pay to get it, and that died. And we're seeing that same lack of openness, lack of adaptability, and lack of adoption with proprietary tech killed technology.
Yeah.
And so with blockchain, we're going to see that, and there's going to be the second or third or fourth generation of blockchains that stay. And if they have openness, ease of use and adoption, and they're non-proprietary.
So the weakness is proprietary.
Yeah,
okay.
And they're the ones that are going to succeed. So from a cybersecurity perspective...
Probably worth just interjecting there. On the OSI, that was IBM's playbook in the late 80s. This playbook is a very well-played playbook by IBM, and they are doing it again. And you're seeing it. We did quite a good job in 2015, 2016 of persuading them to not go down the proprietary route and open source it to Hyperledger. But when you read in the papers, Santander sending money to themselves, that's pretty much a waste of time. They've been doing that for hundreds of years. You're actually looking at someone who's not having so much fun on their own. If you look at IBM working with Ford, that's just a tech vendor working with one of their clients.
Yeah, true.
Or IBM with Maersk, that is a company working with their tech vendor. It's only useful when you start seeing Maersk and their competitors, or Ford and their competitors coming together.
Yeah.
So,
No, agreed.
No, that's right. And we're seeing at the board level where boards are recognizing they can only get value in their current business models to a certain level, that they can't really extract any more value in the way they operate. Yeah. So they're forced to cooperate. And what they're doing is they're making the consortiums, and boards are actually assigning the head of strategy, head of innovation to go out and look at blockchain, look at AI, look at big data, to come up with new business models, new revenue sources to stay relevant.
Okay.
I mean, there's an insurance company we talked to, that's the sole job of the person. It's been around for 150 years. The board doesn't think that company will stay around for much longer. So they're looking at tech to keep them relevant.
But if we look at that, are we agreed that blockchain is enterprise ready?
I think the question is actually...
It's a strange question. It's a strange question. It's probably
I
my
would
fault.
invert it and say, is an enterprise ready for blockchain?
Yeah.
So, to me, fundamentally, that's the big problem, and it starts with, as I mentioned earlier, it's data, the architecture, but it's the human factor, it's the behaviour. So, sorry, do you want to take? I don't know.
Yeah. Did you want to jump in? Yeah, please do. Just if you don't mind introducing yourself and being loud.
Chris Mills.
Hi, Chris.
I run consultancies in the field, mainly on the buy side, who are essentially the laggards of the service industry. However, they have the largest profit.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your internet analogy and that take-up. So, if that works, who are, and let's get down to brass tacks, what are the use cases and success stories from taking internet now into being prevalent and just lots of activity that have been commercial? Who are the commercial winners of that process that you can then replicate into this stuff?
Great question.
Blockchain.
Yeah.
Yeah, from an internet perspective, the ones that won out were the early adopters who implemented the infrastructure for the internet. So the Cisco's, the ISPs, Comcast, AT&T, and the service providers that provided the rails to build these applications. If they didn't do that, we wouldn't have Google, we wouldn't have Amazon, we wouldn't have Facebook.
If we play with that internet analogy, which works really well, we're starting to see the emergence of the Yahoos and the eBays. We haven't yet seen the Googles. It took a while. The Netflix, it takes a while. The Facebooks, the Instagrams, they take a decade to come.
So I say we're in Ask Jeeves, just about getting to Ask Jeeves. We're nowhere near Google. But the thing is...
The proprietary conversation you just had was, if you remember, Time Warner purchased AOL. The reason they bought AOL was because they believed that AOL would have monopolistic access to the US consumer market through the internet. They thought that all US consumers would have to use AOL to gain access to the internet, and they bought them for that purpose.
And for that amount of money.
And we now recognise that as one of the biggest corporate follies.
Absolutely.
You're right at that time.
Yeah, the walled garden, closed nature of networks won't work because humanity just doesn't operate that way. We need openness, we need to interoperate with each other. So we need a network of networks to actually foster innovation.
So a lot of the marketing material that was used, they don't anymore, by digital assets, because I was one of the original investors in DAH, was they own Hyperledger. A completely inappropriate and incorrect legal statement. IBM also used to use that quite a lot, and I've still seen it on some marketing material. I think it's, so the points around, the infrastructural components, for me, the most, because I'm female, sure, interesting part was when somebody created the shopping basket. When you actually brought something to the masses, is made the internet relevant through email and through actually real time in the palm of your hand. And I always say that the trick about technology is to convert it from something that the experts care about only into, in the palm of your hand, you are empowering the end user.
Yes, but are we not over-analysing, what's the word, analysing the whole blockchain internet? Is it really a good example?
Well, the internet is a B2C play. It's business to consumer, and it's been played out quite successfully. Blockchain is B2B, and to a very less extent, what you're going to start seeing is companies using blockchain very much in the background, and it disappears from view as a technology, but it's actually gluing people together. Just as most people in this room don't remember how to work without email, if you get 10 years hence, you're going to find it difficult to work without blockchain. And I think the best example of that is things like invoices. So an archaic and Victorian dance of two financial departments trying to get to the same, or agree to the same number. They're trying to get to consensus, to use the name and use the word.
Chris, do you want to come back? By the way, we may as well open this up now, because I think there's probably quite a few questions out there.
I can't hold back.
Okay, go for it, Chris.
My version is it enterprise ready? It's not from the board to see the blockage is commercially ready. Is it ROI ready? Technically is a different point.
Jenny?
And security is part of that. Because that means you've got loss, but it's the ROI.
It is, and there's so much fear around the use. So I don't disagree that blockchain is B2B, but it's B2B in that you're empowering. So if you think about use cases around identity, you're actually empowering users to be able to use the ledger to manage and own their own data, their own identity, or their own asset register, to trust what they're buying through the asset register. So I think it's B2B, but I think ultimately, by bringing trust and transparency, to me, those use cases will be the ones where you are ultimately strategically empowering the end user. But the fear aspect is always from ignorance, but the problem we sit with, and you mentioned it earlier about the regulator, is, where we are at the moment is the regulator saying, well, it's up to you. You're the board, you get paid for making decisions. And I've been there, I've sat in the risk of that seat of wearing an orange boiler suit where the regulator says to me, well, you do it, Jenny, if you want to, but understand when we finally get round to writing more than just guidance, if we don't like what you've done, we're going to fine you at best.
Yeah.
So, you're putting people in a very impossible position when they have no clear guidance and it can be retrospectively applied, that rule book. And I think that's a very unhelpful culture that we're operating in around adoption.
So when it comes to a board then, when it comes to, turning that question on its head, who should be the person on the board that runs blockchain? Is that going to be the information officer? Is it going to be the CTO?
So I've been a CDO once upon a time, and I can tell you now, it doesn't exist.
Right.
That is the most ridiculous title, ridiculous job, and they only did it to prove that it was completely stupid. And I refused to have a sign after 2 weeks. Purely because the data doesn't belong to an individual. It is your bread and butter, it's your oxygen in an organisation. And that's part of what's wrong with so many financial services organisations today and others, is that the data ownership, they try and find somebody else to make the bearer of the data problem. And the problem we've got with boards... And
do you think the same thing about CDOs, data people on board?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the challenge we have is to educate the boards that their organisations, rightly, commonly, they are not the only silly child in the playground right here, right now. It was fashionable 20 years ago, it isn't anymore, is the fragmentation. Their technology, their operating models, their procedures, their data architectures, their taxonomies for data, completely fragmented. And no board wants to be told that the wiring under the floor and the crap behind the walls is what's wrong with their organisation. What they want to do is they want to buy another sexy piece of technology that's a silver bullet, a new app, a new this, that's going to transform their organisation, when in fact, it's actually the really boring, unsexy
Bravo. Yeah,
stuff.
agreed.
And that's the real problem. No one's brave enough to tell the board that.
Do you want to take...
I just want to, I've been on both ends. So I've been the CIO, and on boards, and the whole ethos of the board is to manage risk, right? They're not going to go and say, they don't want the orange jumpsuit. So they're very risk averse, but at the same time they recognize that they need to do something, and blockchain is not an IT purchase. It's not a technology purchase.
Absolutely, yeah.
It comes from the business. The business says, I've read about my competitor doing this. We want to join this consortium. We want to innovate. We want new revenue streams. How do we do it? Then they're the ones with the budget holders. They're the ones with the appetite. Then they approach the CIO and say, we want to do blockchain, make it happen, and here's the budget.
That's how it should be.
That's how it should be. But CIOs don't have the freedom and the flexibility to play with that type of technology because they don't have the budgets. Most of their roles are around keeping the lights on, keeping the thing stable.
No, I think we might be getting into something now.
So each board comes from each industry. Each industry is going through that blockchain journey where that strategy inside the board is being discovered or grown organically and shared across each of the industries. And obviously the bank started. Following that, you can start seeing the shipping industries, the transport industries, and the food industries are all starting to flow and follow a very, very simple path of exploration to a strategy.
But do you think that's supply chain led, right? All of those examples are all about the supply chain.
I think what's happening there is that each industry is working out what their distributed or decentralized challenges are and what their industry challenges are, and then trying to bring this to bear.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's in the mining industry with cobalt, doesn't matter if it's the diamond industry with traceability. To answer the question around, is the blockchain enterprise ready? Back in 2014, we shook down the cryptocurrencies and said, this isn't very useful to us, but the technology is very useful. And that separation, we did quite a good job of splitting. In 2015, we shook down the blockchain technologies under Bitcoin, Ripple, Ethereum, and recognized that these are not enterprise ready. They are not going to make it. Sharing everything with everyone isn't enterprise ready. It's not even regulatory friendly. Being anonymous on a network is never going to fly in the financial services industry. It's just not regulatory friendly.
Yeah.
And the need to build a finance grade ledger that the banks could use and they could use with their clients is what we set out to do in 2015, and we laid the foundation of that. It's what we called CHORUM. 3 years later, 4 years now, we're on the fourth version of that, and we now have the finance grade ledger to build the systems and the applications that we want to build. We have seen a large wave of money go into the cryptocurrencies, and they're still spending that money on media and PR, and you'll see that hopefully run out over the next year.
I think it's running out.
Although the war chest these teams have got are enormous. We've never seen this, so this is novel. We didn't see this in the internet. We're seeing this in the blockchain space, where these people have billions in their treasuries to spend on marketing and persuading you that it's their coin or their protocol that will be the winner. I can assure you, if you are sharing everything, or you're running a network that is allowing you to be anonymous, you will fail. And no one is going to build an application on top of that. So I think, is the blockchain enterprise ready? Some are. Some are proprietary, they will fail and die. Some are sharing everything, they will struggle. And you're watching someone like Vitalik, an incredible individual, start to already talk about what Ethereum 2.0 will look like. Funny enough, it looks very much like CHORUM. And there's a reason for that, because the 40 banks that got together in 2015 sat down and went, what do we need a blockchain that will meet the enterprise needs look like? And the first thing we put down was, we don't want to share everything with everyone. That's a daft idea.
There you go. Yep. We're way over time, and I don't think we've even touched the surface, right? But it would be great, apart from Chris, because I think you're done. You've got two, that's good. They're great. The lady at the back, I'll come back to you, sir. Just the lady at the back, if you just shout, just how you're involved in the whole. Well, it's not even about digital either. It's just transformation, right?
It's the analogy of the idea, yeah? So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, we can say we want to develop blockchain for B2B, but unless we have that interoperability between the B2C, we won't be adopted by the masses. How can we do that?
Okay, sorry to stop you, but you would come back to that.
So you were in RegTech and you were FinTech. We spent some time with the FCA looking at regulatory reporting of mortgages. There's 1,500 mortgage providers in the country. Every 90 days they have to report the mortgage book. That mortgage book is then collated by the FCA and then handed over to the Bank of England. Funny enough, when 1,500 mortgage providers provide their mortgage book, there's either too many mortgages or not enough land. And that information then goes off to the Bank of England to be used in the MPC. To make our monetary policy decisions. The regulator has only had two tools in their toolbox to date. They can either ask for more data or ask for data in a different way. And that's basically what they've been doing for decades. What we did with the FCA and worked hard with them in 2017 to do was understand that they now have a new tool in their book, state. They can push back the regulation to the actors, in this case the 1,500 mortgage providers, to get them to agree the mortgage book for the country, not just their own little piece, but the whole piece, and they can hand that whole book over as one. They don't have to share commercially sensitive information like your name or your house address, but all that personal identifiable information you can keep. But the other information, such as the value and the postcode, the regulator wants to see. That is where we solve that problem for the regulator. You can read about that in the press. I think that's where we are focusing, where you say it's enterprise ready. Technology can do that, and we've shown it to be successful.
Do you want to come back? Or?
As you said, I guess my question is not tech, it's not about the tech. It's important that we have cross-industry collaboration to build those open public networks that allow the little closed networks to get permission. I wonder if it's not just about the enterprise, unless you get the consumers on board willing to use those open ledgers, then connecting the private. You've got to make the apps able for consumers to use it easily. And we're stuck now because
Do you have to do that?
Yeah.
You do or you don't?
Well, it's all about, so where we are with blockchain, it's a really funny analogy. It's where mobile phones used to be. Right now with blockchain in this proprietary closed way, you can only ring your colleagues if you're on the same carrier. You can't
Or you
send
could
a
only,
message.
you remember the interoperability with text?
Yeah.
That was insane. You
Yeah.
could only text on the same network.
Yeah,
Remember that?
and if you wanted to send it from Vodafone to O2,
Yeah, no
you paid
chance.
20p
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something
yeah.
extra. So that's where we are with blockchain
Yeah, I think
kind of
you're right.
today. So what is happening with standards, and that's what the same thing happened with GSM and 4G and LTE, is that's allowing implementations that are compliant to allow cross-network interoperability. And that's one of the biggest barriers to enterprise and for mass adoption of blockchain. And that's one of the focuses of what has to be solved, and that's what we've done.
Yeah, okay, good. Gentleman at the front. I mean,
Monty.
we're probably going to have one more question after that. I mean, you're available to chat to people afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So, so you can have personal chats then.
I'm Irfan Latif, and I run a boarding school in London, an independent boarding school. For me, it's about how do we ensure now that the young generation comes through understand blockchain. So how can we make sure that's part of the curriculum, part of what they need to know. As Mr. said, blockchain is here to stay. And for me, how can blockchain have an impact on people outcomes in education?
That is a fabulous question.
It's a great question. Can I start?
Yes, your
I'm really
turn
passionate
anyway.
about this.
Yeah, please.
So I have, my kids are 19 to 27, I think, 28, I can't remember. But anyway, that's all very good. And they know more about this technology than most of my peers do. It's just I happen to be particularly passionate about distributed edge technology and the like. So I try and explain to people when I talk to cynical and fearful people about this technology that their kids are way ahead of them. So if you stand in a coffee shop and there is somebody in front of you, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be paying on their phone if they're under 25, right? My kids have never heard of the gold standard. It means nothing to them. Unless they studied A-level economics, they didn't care about the gold standard. It's all fear, it's all about trust, and it's all on the phone. And they've also grown up in a global society. So a US dollar, a euro, a bit, it doesn't matter. It's just another word, and they are completely immune to that vocabulary. So therefore, they've never trusted in bankers, they don't trust in politicians, they don't trust
But
in...
do they trust in teachers?
They trust in consensus and the technology. That matters to them.
Yeah.
So I think that this is something that's really very powerful and really resonates to things that matter to a generation that's different from my generation. So, my children have grown up in a society where they listen to the news and they really don't like what they're hearing from their members of the same country and from their politicians. And they've grown up in an era where people lost their jobs because of bad bankers. So, me representing. So, to hear trust, to hear consensus, to hear immutability, those are concepts that are really fundamental to their value system. Not all 20-year-olds, but a lot of them. Therefore, this is something that really resonates. And I think that actually making this relevant to the curriculum and reintroducing some of these concepts is very powerful to their mental health well-being. And I don't
think it's as easy as that because, my kids at school near Brighton, and bearing in mind that I'm not a complete idiot when it comes to technology, speaking to a teenager, the idea of bringing coding, I was very, proactive. So we got coding in school, in school, But it's very difficult to get a kid interested in coding unless it's like very kind of basic, because it becomes like algebra or an extra maths lesson. I'm just saying, how do you do it?
But you find what's relevant. Gaming is relevant.
Gaming works, yes.
Crypto is relevant to kids.
Yeah.
Gaming is about identity.
That's true.
And all of that stuff and how you use distributed ledger and blockchain in gaming is absolutely a strategic business commercial use case that Chris is going to be really excited about. So as is identity management, as is crypto, which is the new emerging asset class of financial services. That's how you make it relevant, because what's underneath it matters. And I think that's a really easy way
I agree with that. Because they're used to using tokens, right? Tokens in games.
All the games.
Yeah.
So can I just add to that? I mean, as a society, the current generation that went digital, we've been very naive and we've given up our rights to privacy very easily.
It's all gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
But the next generation of children that are growing up, they recognise this mistake, and they are.
You think
not,
so? I hope so, bro.
No, I'm saying
really. I really do.
They are being trained early on that they should not put personal information up. That's my data. Why do you want it? Why should I put my real name? So they're growing up with a new mentality.
I'd love to agree with you, but I'm not sure.
I'm talking about the under 10s, the new generation. Not
my teenagers put anything away.
The teenagers, they put anything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But for them to have that control, they need the technology to match their expectation, and that's where the blockchain technology can help with that. Because, as you said, Jenny, it gives people control back to control their data.
Richard, do you want to say?
Yeah, presumably secondary. So, 1991, 92, I spent a fruitless year trying to persuade the teachers of my school to allow me and a cohort to be on the internet. Yeah, 91,
so you were a geek then,
91, 92, right? This is 3 years before the web was invented. Good God, it was hard. All right, it's a dirty old internet, full of porn, loads of adult material, no chance, not allowed, no way. Go back to your school and find that cohort and let them do what they weren't allowed to do. Yeah. Right? There's a generation that you are stifling, undoubtedly, because you are concerned about protecting. There is a generation coming up that have come through the primary schools and now in your secondary that are digitally savvy, they're digitally native, and they're digitally safer than I. Yeah. I know that because I've got a 10 and a 12-year-old, happily play Fortnite with them, and I'm watching Fortnite turn into the next generation's Facebook. That is a discovery where we say, oh, we're banning Fortnite, it's horrible. No, Fortnite is a Facebook, and it's a highly collaborative tool which they're working with to build friendships in a distributed way. You don't recognise that until you get in the game and you understand it.
Yeah. And lots of rumours that Disney are going to buy it as well.
I would.
Empower them through a project. That's the way forward. Empower them to do something and say, there's a school prize for this. I think that's the most exciting.
Let them
build a new game.
Let them lead you, and you will discover more. Last year, to take it back to blockchain, CryptoKitties came through back end of, it wasn't last year, it was the year before. CryptoKitties came through. I had a lot of things to be looking at the back end of last year, and I sent my 10 and 12-year-old to go and investigate CryptoKitties. They spent 40 minutes, I gave them $50 to go and buy some CryptoKitties. They came downstairs, having not spent a penny of the ETH that I'd given them, and they said, that's a pyramid scheme, Daddy. Now, they didn't know what a pyramid scheme was, but they explained the pyramid scheme to me and went, this is nuts. Why would we do this? How about we build some kitties and sell them instead?
I think you should hire them.
And that is how I would do that. Let them discover.
Conscious of time, fabulous. Given you, I've enjoyed it immensely. One more question, maybe. A killer question. You are the killer.
I'm not sure it's a killer question. I'm from Halifax. Used to be involved. Literally, when you go into banking, I was told what I will ever. Part of my job was selling their banking. Banks didn't want it.
Well, which year was this?
98.
Yeah. Okay.
You would go around the bank. There was somebody that would be interested in it, but there'd be another department, call centre, that didn't want it because it was technical. The team in charge of the branch wouldn't want it because it was. So we had to do a business. It's interesting. What is the business case? I was selling this to a bank tomorrow. What's the business case?
Marco Polo is absolutely the best example of that, where you're seeing multiple people inside the bank counting invoices and multiple people outside the bank in the client counting invoices. That entire set of people are spending their entire time sending emails back and forward, phoning each other. Where email allowed inter-company communication, and we finally got employee-to-employee communication, blockchain is now allowing you to do business process. I use the invoice as the archaic and Victorian way that we try and get consensus between, or into business process will now be digitized.
Marco Polo, yes.
Simply put, banks can't solve their cost challenges by themselves any longer. They've done that, they've had 15 years of that, knocking away 15% of their cost base every year. There is no more chipping away at the old block to be done without them falling over. So the only way they're going to solve their cost problem is through collaboration of utilities. But that sounds like they're boiling the ocean. So the really critical success factor here is little proofs of confidence. I call you participating in something that gives you the confidence to believe that you are actually going to realise the business case. I mean, as you've heard, I've sat in many bank boardrooms for many years, and I can assure you, from personal honest experience, we have never realised the business case, ever. So they are cynical, and they're right to be cynical, and all they're doing when they're adopting all these other solutions is adding complexity into their current mess. So it's got to be part of the utility solution, and they've got to do small steps to realise some wins and some confidence that this is not a massive leap for their own their cost base.
I think it's selling retail banking. I just went into my Lloyd's Bank in Haywards Heath last week, and they've revamped it. And in the corner of the bank, about 6 pictures of black horses, their brand, nothing to do with anything. There's a black horse there and a black horse there and a black horse there. I mean, I wonder if they deserve to be disrupted, you know what I mean, for God's sake. Hey, listen, I think it's been awesome. Thank you very much for your insight, all of you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming on a cold day. A round of applause for my panel, please. Thank you. Great.